Achewillow. Season 7, Chapter 8, The Second of Three Skulls. You get used to it, you know? Well, perhaps not all of it, but the overwhelming majority. I suppose it's like anything else. The daredevil starts small, doing tame stunts like jumping off a building into a pile of boxes. When that becomes easy, even mundane, they move on to walking a tightrope between tall towers, or maybe riding down a waterfall in a barrel. That's what they used to do at Niagara Falls, isn't it? My dad once told me, unprompted and out of nowhere as he was prone to doing, that they rotated pilots out from doing air shows because once they lost the fear, once they were accustomed to the adrenaline, they became a threat to themselves and their colleagues. It's the fear that keeps them sharp and alive. There's something similar in every craft, I assume. I used to get a knot in my stomach just thinking of a million ways I could mess up macarons. Now, I can make them in my sleep. And if I'm not messing around with new flavor profiles, I even get a little bored. And when you know it, I mess them up still to this day. I don't separate my eggs properly or mix them long enough. I get overconfident or lazy. The stakes aren't exactly life and death, but the principle is the same. This is what I think is happening to me and Achewillow. I once slept at a complete stranger's home rather than stay at the cafe, only because of a strange noise from outside. There was a time when I'd be paralyzed by fear seeing a strange silhouette in the distance. If you think about it, there's a world in which I never even make it to Achewillow. The Miriam from that world walked into the parking lot at Place Versailles, saw Gulliver's truck, turned around, and went home. Today, I hang out with immortal raccoons and routinely weave small magic into muffins and soup. I saw a woman try to pull a human skull out of an infernal portal, and I periodically talk with patients, and I'm not even sure what he is. I've gotten used to the strangeness, and it's made me dull to the threats. I've survived so many brushes with death to make me careless in the face of dangers I barely understand. I've reached that point where I know enough to be arrogant, but not enough to realize when I'm out of my league. The raccoons tried to warn me. Pearls of blood grow on my hand where Brioche bit me, desperate to stop me from coming inside. I should clean the wound, bandage it, but my muscles refuse to obey my commands. Eventually, the surface tension breaks, and the blood starts making its way down my fingers, pooling at the tip of my thumb. There have been worse things in the Achewillow dining room. Demons have sat at my counter and torn tables to shreds. Murderers have sampled my food, and flesh-hungry sprites almost killed a man here. Where most people sip coffee and nibble egg on toast, I've tasted fear in this place. And I get to add the fox to my list of terrors. I struggled to understand what it is about the animal that rattles my heart so much. At a glance, it's nothing more than a normal fox. It doesn't look rabid. One might even call it tame. There's something in the way patients warned that it was a dead thing that I shouldn't mess around with that made me uneasy. The way the raccoons reacted to the invader really put things into perspective. For all their faults, my refuse goblins don't lack courage. Brave on a good day, brazen on others, they don't shy from much. Except demons and this fox. What do you want? Less of a question than an accusation, my words first don't seem to have an effect on the animal. It tilts its head this way and that, licks at its orange fur, and looks around. Always, its attention comes back to me, but it seems just as interested by the Achewillow itself. Eyes of brass dance around with ever-growing curiosity until the whole fox can no longer sit still. It speaks. It speaks, but I miss all of its words. Syllables escape the fox's mouth, but not through lips or a tongue. Instead, they spill forth from a skull devoid of flesh. A dead thing, but only as long as the animal talks. Once it's given an answer, the illusion reasserts itself, and there's once more meat and fur to hide the bones. The blood on my hand cools, marking the passage of time, but my mind is lost, struggling to make sense of the vision. Flesh did not melt, nor did it shrivel and blow away. Rather, in what felt like a spark's lifetime, the skin rotted off the bone, suffering the passage of 10 lifetimes before even a syllable was spoken. Then, just as quickly, all of it grew back at the end of the fox's sentence. "I said," it speaks again, going through the whole process anew. "I'm cold. May I please have my scarf back?" The voice is that of a woman, though it takes a while for my brain to accept that. Disembodied and struggling to match the skull's movement, it wouldn't be a stretch to compare the fox's discord with that of a puppet or ventriloquist dummy, albeit a rather morbid one. "No," I insist, the trembling of my words doing a poor job of conveying my assurance. "I asked you first, what are you?" It starts. "I'm a fox. I'd think that somewhat obvious." The fox talks while looking over its shoulder and walking away. The way it moves its head and sways its skinless skull seems almost mocking. "Foxes don't talk," I say, breaking free of my paralysis to follow the animal. "Well, I talk, and now that I've told you, you know as much as I do. Talking foxes don't just happen," I explain. The animal answers with a wave of its fluffy tail while it smells the tiles near the register. There's a shiver that goes through its body, putting truth to the claim of cold. "Have I told you how I hate what you've done with the place?" This time, I can hear the clicking of bones and scraping of teeth as the fox speaks. While the voice remains ethereal, it doesn't stop the puppet from making its own sounds. "How could you? We've never talked." "I don't suppose we have." Crouching on its back legs, the fox looks up at the counter and leaps. Gracefully, like a skilled predator, it lands its front paws on the edge and pulls itself up. "Get off of there!" I try to push it away with the broom, but the clever animal evades the first 2 thrusts in its direction. The third, however, lands, and with a yelp, the fox falls from its perch and behind the register. But I notice something. When screaming, the fox's head remains intact. "You're a demon possessing an animal?" "No." It shakes itself, struggling to regain some composure after the fall. Meanwhile, I go around the counter, intent on cornering the beast. "Some sort of animal ghost, then?" "That's just silly." The fox tries to get past me, but I have it trapped. If it tries to jump on the counter again, I can swat it with the broom. Any attempt at making a run for it will be met with equal force. I'm reminded for a moment of what happened last time I tried to trap a creature I didn't understand. It took some magic far beyond my grasp to contain the macaron sprite, but not before it did some serious damage. Hopefully, the fox is easier to manage. "Then what?" Sniffing the air while ignoring the broom, the orange intruder decides to explore the empty display. While I've removed any leftover pastries and baked goods, the smell of butter and sugar lingers there like a fog over a graveyard. "I told you, I'm a fox, and as far as I can remember, I've always been a fox. And I've told you foxes don't talk." Noticing at last the wall I've set keeping her from freedom, the fox decides to sit and groom itself a little more. "I'm running out of time," it says, while behaving like it has not a care in the world. "I need to go, but it's going to be a cold night. May I please have my scarf?" The clicking of bone on bone while the fox speaks reminds me of something. It's a sound not dissimilar to that of wooden spoons in a kitchen drawer. The same song as when you're looking for that one specific utensil, rattling the rest against each other. I look up, a twitch of my eye, and see the collection of wooden spoons from Dufour women past. 5 where there should be 6. "You," I accuse. "That was your scarf. You're the one who stole my spoon." The fox pulls her head back, looking thoroughly offended by my words. It's almost funny how it imitates human reactions to things I say, and perhaps I would find it adorable if it weren't for the talking. "Your spoon? None of these are your spoons to keep. The scarf, however, is mine, and I need it to stay warm. Please be so kind as to retrieve it for me." My mind wanders to the apartment upstairs, to a drawer in my bedroom where I've carefully folded and stored the red scarf. At first, I thought it was one of Ophelia's, but closer inspection revealed it to be too old for that. And now a talking animal, a dead thing, demands that I give it back. "Give me my spoon back and I'll think about it." The fox shakes her head, but not as a refusal. It's an animal's reflex, as if she were trying to shake off some invisible restraint. "Not your spoon," she insists. Her head goes from skull to flesh, from dead to living. I take a step back, unsure what it is I'm dealing with and unwilling to get caught in the backlash should there be any. Then, as if snapping back awake from a dream, the fox lifts her head to look at me. If there ever was a spark in her eyes that belied the ability to talk, it's gone. "Fox?" I ask. But my words only manage to spook the animal. She runs, but not in a way to wriggle between my legs and avoid the wrath of my broom. Instead, she bolts through the counter and across the dining room floor. When she reaches the wall, she doesn't even slow, scampering right through mortar and brick and into the street. The last I see of the fox, she's stopped under a street lamp, looking back at the Achewillow. A shiver goes through her before she disappears into the shadows, like a ghost. I owe her an apology. Not that she's getting one, however. I'm not so petty as to keep count, but I feel confident that when it comes to trading wrongs and false accusations, Ophelia's balance far outweighs mine. To this day, she pins on me things I have no knowledge of and blames me for events she won't even explain. There's a grim picture of her being painted in my mind, however. Something about her grievances seem more consequential than I had first surmised. What I would have once dismissed with a wave of my hand like one might a bad smell, the burden she brought to Achewillow now lingers in the air. It's a potent miasma, one that can be ignored with effort or when masked by more dramatic events, but it creeps back up in the conscious mind whenever I give it thought. Only a few nights ago, I watched her have a breakdown while trying to pull a human skull from woven branches. There's obviously a story behind that. There's a story behind everyone. And maybe I haven't invested enough in learning what Ophelia's story is. Today's service at the Pilvist House is much the same as the first I attended. Less blinded by surprise, I try to take note of more details while there. It's difficult to get a solid understanding of what it is Ian and his brethren worship. They give themselves to the great cloud, but then offer sacrifice in the form of croissants to something different. I say something because I've yet to decide what it is that sprouts from the table, going through the seasons of life, leaving only a handful of seeds behind. Is this another demon? Perhaps another form of the hunger demon that plagued Achewillow before my arrival. It would seem all too likely that the Pilvists are keeping the monster sated as I did my own demon for months. How they're doing it with mundane, if especially tasty, croissants is beyond me. The service doesn't offer any further information. Watching the tabletop grow and animate itself to life is terrifying, but also awe-inspiring. If this is a demon, is it somehow bound to the table, folded into the grain of the wood, laminated like the butter in croissant dough? Is it the table itself they worship? Some sort of artifact from an age past, perhaps carved of a wood long gone extinct. In a place like Achewillow, such a thing would be heavy with meaning. But how would I know if it's made from Achewillow wood? And where does the cloud fit into it? So many questions that I feel will keep me coming back to the Pilvist House for a long time. Meanwhile, I'm happy to think and hope that perhaps there is something to this reverence. Did the robes not fit? Ian asks as we walk back to Rue Principale. After a cold night, the weather has decided on clemency for the day. Rare beams of sunlight, harbingers of warmer days, follow us like a spotlight across a stage. Moments like this, more than witnessing the grotesque birthing of the seeds, go a long way to making me understand the Pilvist point of view, this feeling of being chosen in subtle ways. Not sure I'm there yet, I explain. I don't even understand what happened back there. The fingers in my pocket roll around the 2 seeds that have been given to me so far. I twist them against one another, trying to squeeze understanding from their skin. I wanted to know what kind of tree gave such seeds, and I gave it the old college try, but came up empty-handed. If you can cook with it, I'll identify whatever seed or nut you want, but my knowledge is culinary, not horticultural. Coriander, chia, nigella, all have found their way into my cooking at some point or other, and I could pick them out of a lineup by scent alone. Ian gathers his thoughts. It looks far more spectacular than it is. In the end, there isn't much more to it than what you saw. We offer up your baked goods to the great cloud. She consumes them, and in exchange we receive her blessing. But what's with the table? What are those seeds? And what is the great cloud? Usually, when I have to deal with a religion, it's all so very allegorical. Ian smiles, reflecting skyward the same light that shines down upon us. He's smiling at the great cloud, offering a prayer of contentment to the silent deity. Or he's just enjoying the warm light. The table is an altar, if perhaps a more lively one than you'll find in most churches. The seeds are just seeds. They don't even grow, though they are filled with more nutrients than a body needs in a day. The great cloud, however. We turn onto Rue Principale as Ian trails off. I'd always thought of the great cloud as hanging over Achewillow. Any time of day, I can look up and see it fully in a clear sky, or notice its outline against other, higher-hanging clouds. Now that I know where the worship happens, my perspective has shifted a little. I can now notice when I'm no longer directly in its shadow, and that I feel somewhat lesser for it. The great cloud is hard to define, Ian continues. Or rather, it makes no demands to be. You wouldn't ask Father Mitchell to explain his God. The whole point of faith, not understanding. We are simply blessed with a goddess that shines her eternal presence over us, manifests when properly compelled, and rewards us for our devotion in tangible ways. You're joining us for the miracle, Miss Dufour. All you need to know is that the great cloud is glad for your presence, and that she's been waiting a long time for it. Anything else will be revealed in time. The cadence of his words and the calm with which he delivers them go a great way to obfuscate the evasive reply. While not completely taken by the theatrical ruse, I recognize that I won't get any more answers from him today. This is meant to be a longer dialogue, one that I hope will keep Olivia alive until this so-called miracle takes place. We part ways. He remains the aloof but content cult leader, and I work my way towards the afternoon shift. If yesterday was any indication, there will be more good news from Henry. Perhaps Olivia will be out of the ICU. Maybe she'll even be awake again, demanding she be brought a decent meal instead of whatever slop she's fed at the hospital. That's the miracle, perhaps. Not a flashy display of sound and lights, but rather a slow-paced recovery. Gods and goddesses work in mysterious ways, don't they? Even Dufours don't fall prey to spectacle. Though, we do enjoy a little bit of flair. The door opens and delicate bells, like songbirds, welcome me inside. Where there should be the bustle of a busy dining room, I hear only silence. Even the ever-present light folk music and pop jazz I sometimes toss into the playlist are absent. There's only the humming of fluorescent tubes, the subdued whisper of earphones, and the tick, tick, ticking of needles. How did I end up here? The needles stop ticking and the headphones go quiet. Pearls of Wisdom has lost a lot of color since last I was here 2 days ago. The shelves have been ransacked, leaving swaths of barren wall where a rainbow assortment of yarn had once been. Most of the books near the back have been purchased, leaving but a paltry assortment of beginner guides and patterns. Footsteps echo in the empty store as I walk forward, trying to read Ophelia as she tries to read me. Like her store, she looks like less of herself. Much of the malign energy that crackled around her has disappeared, sapped away by much the same circumstances that have emptied the walls. She's pale, more pale than usual, and her hair is loose rather than tied in her habitual braids and ponytails. Her face seems more gaunt, bereft of the warmth her eternal resentment normally provides. Ophelia pets the cat on her lap, a mechanical gesture that seems to bring neither of them any joy. Perhaps the bandage on her ring finger is to blame. This is a defeated creature, beaten down by an enemy both more modern and dangerous than outright violence. While it's not as dramatic as a hanging, stoning, or burning at the stake, there's something insidious to the systematic dismantling of a person. It's cruel how the Inquisition pulled her apart, the same way they almost did me. I'm not here to gloat, I say, letting just a little too much pity slip between my teeth. Well, if you're here to thank me for the umbrella, you're welcome. And yes, I did find it. She knows that I saw her in the forest, her and the army of crochet animals she had created. She knows I followed her, spied on her, and abandoned her there. And I suppose that I wanted her to know. That's why I left the umbrella behind, isn't it? Still, sitting behind the counter, a queen in the ruins of her castle, she keeps her chin high, defiant, and ready to spit in my eye if given the chance, or spit in the eye of anyone who comes at her. It's the same attitude she brought to the Achewillow the first time we met, and to every other encounter we've had since. But for the first time, I can almost admire the resilience of it. Then, I'm reminded of what she did to Gulliver because of that same stubborn attitude, and I hate her all over again. So, I say, making a show of looking around, you're leaving Achewillow after all. Ophelia follows my gaze, along with William, her cat. Both study my actions, still trying to read between the lines. That's none of your business, she says, almost spitting the words. I'm not gloating, Ophelia. I'm not even sure why I'm here, or why you were here in the first place. I pull down one of her Knitting for Beginners books from its shelf, nearly toppling the only other book next to it to the ground. It's a good idea, that and the classes she gave. I might consider picking some favorite cookbooks of my own and having them available for customers, for sale or perhaps to loan, like a little free cooking library. Leafing through the pages, I can understand how Ophelia pulls magic from this practice. Much like cooking, baking, and confectionaries, there's a language to this art. And if you can speak a language, I've learned, then you can cast a spell. Didn't get what you wanted from spying on me? Oh, how tempting it is to snap back at her with the same level of resentment, twist the knife and salt the wound, as it were. This position of hers is one I've occupied more than once in our dynamic. For some reason, Ophelia has always managed to keep the upper hand. She knows more about her witchcraft than I do mine, and at times she seemed to know even more about the Dufour. The scales have always tilted in her favor, and when I would lash out, seldom were the times when she would allow me grace. I'm someone who keeps lists. Ingredients, recipes, orders, and groceries. Lists are important, and at times, I keep lists of grudges. No, I agree, choosing grace of my own. I didn't. Got more questions than answers, if I have to be honest. I avoid eye contact by digging deeper into the book, as if it held answers between instructions on herringbone stitches and basket weave. Pages making a loud clap, I close the book. The sound was meant to be dramatic, but in the empty, echoing store, it resonates too loud. It's less a statement and more of a threat, one I immediately regret. Careful not to cause more of a scene, I put the beginner's guide back on its shelf, a few inches from the other book so as not to disturb it. If you ever feel like explaining what I saw, I offer, taking careful steps back to the door, I'll be happy to listen. Barely do I get halfway back to the Achewillow that I already regret my offer. Curiosity got the best of me, and now I've invited my nemesis over for tea and conversation. And again, how else am I supposed to learn what she was doing and where that skull came from? My immediate assumption is that a demon brought it back years, if not decades ago, allowing the vines and brambles to grow over it. The Hellgate has a lot of other items and artifacts, random objects and debris that have found their way interwoven with the fabric of the portal. Arriving at the cafe, it's disappointing to see that neither Mayor Byrne nor Mayor Lagacé are at their table. Hopefully, they'll come in for lunch and I can ask a few questions. If anyone knows about the Hellgate, it would be them. Or someone close to them. "Hey there," I greet Annabelle. Her spirit seems even enough until she lays eyes on me. It would be an exaggeration to describe the look she gets as angry. Resentful is the correct intensity, but misses the mark. No, it's something more subtle. She's a cocktail of various low-intensity emotions. Nothing so strong as to dominate, but together they mix to become something cool, a little caustic, and potent enough to be noticed. "Hey, is this about the Pilvis thing? 'Cause you know I'm just doing this for Olivia, right?" A smile crosses her lips, but it's not for me. It's the side dish to a nod of gratitude given to Stefan for refilling her coffee mug. "They're a cult, Miriam. Twist and turn it however you want in your head. They're not your friends. Sure, good customers. You don't turn away someone buying rounds for the house, but that doesn't mean they own the establishment." I shed my jacket, replacing it with my apron. Stealing a glance to the spoons over the register, I touch the one in my pocket, reassuring myself that it's still there. Even though I saw my spoon when I grabbed the apron off its hook, the wooden handle sticking out of the pocket, it's nice to feel the grain under my fingers. "Don't worry about it," I say with confidence. "I've got it under control." Visibly unconvinced, Annabelle sips her coffee, wincing at the too hot liquid as it touches her lips. She looks at the door, either waiting for someone to pass its threshold or dreading an arrival. "Can't tell me if your mom's coming for lunch?" I ask, poking the ground despite the possible minefield. "She's always here for lunch. It's tradition. And you know what they say about tradition." The same thing they say about ritual, I assume, but I keep it to myself. Aside from my trip to the Pilvis house, the whole day has been a continuous exercise in diplomacy. It's one thing to suffer Ophelia's resentment, a good thing, one might argue, but quite another when it's Annabelle lighting the passive-aggressive short fuse. I pour myself some coffee, marveling again at the machine's cooperation. The door chime sings, inviting new customers in. The lunch rush is soon to begin, yet each arrival tugs at Annabelle's attention. Like invisible wires attached to her eyelids, the pull of the door is a pull on her head, twisting it in its direction. Each time she looks, and each time she turns back, disappointed. "What do you want with my mom, anyway? You know she's not exactly in the Dufour fan club, right?" "Oh, I'm well aware, but you know what they say about the enemy of the person you kind of tolerate for maybe also being your enemy." Stefan, who's been quietly listening to our conversation while ringing up customers, stops for a moment. He frowns and counts on his fingers, trying to comprehend what it is I'm saying, but loses interest as a fresh order comes in. "Mom's not going to get on board with your crusade against Ophelia, if that's what you're talking about. Besides, isn't she on the way out?" Kneeling down, I rearrange the pastries in the display, making sure they're all distributed evenly, moving those at the bottom into empty trays close to the top. I make a mental list of what's missing and needs replacing. Banana nut cookies, the ever-popular chocolatine, chocolate and praline cupcakes, and some all-grain bread. As a matter of habit, I also glance over to the jar of biscotti next to the register. Not a very popular item here in Achewillow, but it's always good to calculate when I'll need to make more. There are plenty left, but I remain arrested by the jar. If things don't go my way, it may very well be the last one I'll stock for a while. I only have one regular customer who eats biscotti. It's not just that, I explain, walking back from the kitchen with plastic bins filled with pastries. I don't want Ophelia taking all her secrets with her. Your mom might just be able to answer a few questions, that's all. Annabelle pushes her empty mug towards me, hinting at the need for a refill. Glad to know her cold demeanor is no indication of a strained friendship. Pilvists aside, it seems like we're still close enough for free coffee. How many of these have you had? At the speed she drank this mug and the jittery drumming of her fingers on the counter, I expect she's gone well over the recommended dose. That was her fourth, Stefan interrupts, tossing her a rather accusatory look. Should we cut her off? Stefan shrugs, caring more about the accounting of the coffee drunk than he does its consequences. I'm fine, Annabelle says, standing up. But I'm reminded coffee isn't just a stimulant, if you know what I mean. Gross, I reply, handing her the keys to the washroom. I wait until I hear the clicking of the lock on the door and for a lull between customers. Do you know what she's been waiting for? Stefan shrugs before adjusting the position on the tip jar by 1/4 of an inch. He rubs his chin, an almost theatrical gesture to express that he's thinking about my question. She didn't mention, and I didn't ask, but she's been here since 8, waiting. I thought it was for you. She has a lot of distracting you from your work to catch up on, after all, but apparently I misjudged. A snort of disagreement escapes me. How dare he? We both hear the chimes sing, but neither of us pays it mind. Customers can wait. We've only got a few moments to figure this out. Annabelle is not a distraction. She's a friend, a valuable, if unpaid, member of the team. And the poor sucker who gets stuck taking your place when you vanish. When did Stefan get so lippy? I don't know if I should be glad that he's showing character or pissed that I have to suffer his personal growth. Either way, we'll have to have a little talk about respect for the boss. Who am I kidding? He's not wrong. If I were to venture a guess, Stefan continues, I'd say she's waiting for another one of your friends. Jordan, maybe? Or maybe she invited some common acquaintance. God forbid it's that podcaster buddy of yours. Neither of these options sits well with me. Annabelle isn't one to keep secrets or plan unwelcome surprises. If it were someone we both know, she'd have mentioned something. Wouldn't she? Ding ding! A familiar voice calls out from the register. Service has really gone to hell in this place. I lean to look behind Stefan at the new arrival, confirming my suspicions. All the parts fall together with this crucial piece of the puzzle. Her hair is longer, and she's lost just a bit of weight, but she's gained the sort of posture that only comes to those healthy of mind and spirit. That sneaky little, I mumble to myself. Annabelle thinks she's putting together some sort of intervention to pull me out of the clutch of the Pilvists, but all she's done is deliver me exactly what I was looking for. Someone to answer all my questions about the cult. Someone who used to be a member. And someone I've terribly missed over the last 2 years. Petunia? Pete? Achewillow is written by J.F. Dubow and narrated and produced by me, Amy Frost. If you enjoyed this podcast and would like to hear more, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or your preferred podcast platform. Want to support the show? Buy us a coffee. Go to ko-fi.com/Achewillow to donate. Achewillow has a Patreon. Visit patreon.com/Achewillow for details. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram under the username Achewillow.